Welcome to 13. We just are going to hop from one topic to the next because we're moving on from DoorDash for a little bit anyway, because we have a big thing going on here in Colorado. I've been talking about the transparency thing. I've been telling you that the transparency law, DoorDash so far is following it. We'll see if the final pieces that go into place on February 1st, that's when everything will be in place. The receipt side of it for the customers and the drivers. Right now, the drivers are seeing both the total pay and the tip, and it can't be changed. There's no hidden magic numbers. There's nothing. It's just is what it is. It's transparent. It shows the miles. It shows the total pay, and it can't be changed. And as I've stated on the previous 13s, the payments are a little bit higher, but they're much fewer offers. Maybe especially for people who are not in their premier leagues. I'm not even going to say platinum or any of that because it changes so much, but they're premier leagues, which are completely illegal. But we're going to move on from that, and we're going to move on to Uber. During the course of the last few weeks on 13, when I was talking about DoorDash and I needed to complete that series, Uber filed a lawsuit against the state of Colorado for the same thing we've been talking about with DoorDash. The transparency law that went into effect, or that was ratified last year, they waited until mid-January or early January, and Uber filed a lawsuit against the Colorado Department of Labor and against Governor Jared Polis. So the lawsuit primarily claims that it's claiming a violation of their freedom of speech right. And they're claiming that because they say it's saying that, they shouldn't have to provide all of the details to their secret sauce that makes Uber what it is. Now, for those of you, not really in on all of this and you haven't read the 51-page lawsuit, which the link will be included in here to it. So after or whatever, look into the show notes and you will see the link to the lawsuit in its entirety. It's 51 pages, Uber versus Colorado. And it's that as of February 1st, they don't want to be doing this. Well, on this week's podcast, we have a very special podcast. Stephanie Vigil, Colorado House of Representatives member, is the one who, this is her bill, both bills. Well, the TNC came from her DNC bill. The DNC is the Delivery Network bill, and the TNC is the Transportation Network bill. And they're both kind of the same law. Unlike California, Seattle, New York, Minnesota, Massachusetts, other states who keep trying to tweak out the magic number for what is the hourly rate drivers should get. And they keep working. I've always said that's, in my opinion, that's never going to work. You can keep launching those in city after city after city. Those aren't going to work because those do the same thing that I keep saying. Not only do I not believe in, it's just more tactical tricks. And it shouldn't even be allowed in the apps to show you this. But those are all based on active time. So if you get on the apps and you can only get an hour's worth of work in a 10-hour day, it's going to say your active time is whatever that minimum wage is, at least, even if you were underpaid on the orders for that 1 hour. But it's not going to pay you for the 10 hours. I think most people understand this, although I still get a bunch of people saying, well, that's a good law that they're passing. I think that every law that we see that does this, we're going to see the same thing happen. Just failure after failure after failure. The businesses and restaurants lose. The customer loses. The driver always loses. But they're now like their partner restaurants, their partners in these companies' partners, they're losing business and they're getting more fees tacked onto them. The customers are getting way more fees in these cities. And the drivers are getting less pay overall, and the number of drivers is decreasing. And many might think, well, that's a good thing. The oversaturation's dying. No, the oversaturation is staying at about the same percentage level. It's just there are not as many customers ordering. And it's not just because, as you see the snow outside, that it's winter. That is a factor. But it's not just that. Year to year to year, it's that the customers don't want to pay another 30-40% higher than they were paying, which they already noticed to be too high. So more and more customers are looking for, if they do want to continue using the apps, they're looking for what is, I feel like more people are going into, especially the food delivery apps on the customer side, and looking at what's a special here. Because on some of the apps, on Uber Eats or DoorDash, I'm not familiar with the DoorDash customer side, but on Uber Eats anyway, it'll say, 2 for 1 at this restaurant. Really, by the time you're done there, it's not 2 for 1. You're going to end up spending the full amount you would have paid, plus even more, even on a 2 for 1 deal, than if you just went in and got it. And if you actually don't do one of the deals, you're going to end up spending 3-4 times as much as if you just went in and got it yourself. We've been through how that works, the upcharging of menu items, which Florida in July 1st, their law says that can no longer happen. We will be diving into that soon. But on on this week's podcast, which will premiere on YouTube on Monday evening. And usually after I premiere it on Tuesdays, because the audio podcast, which is what it is, drops on Tuesday morning. But it will premiere on Monday, and it will stay up publicly, because it has many guests on it. It's not a panel like you're used to. It's each person one-on-one with me. But I usually do the podcast straight through recorded. This one is done in parts because I have Stephanie Vigil. I have the Rideshare guy, Chris and Sergio. I have Mike Drop Barbecue, Jeff. I still have to record with Rideshare Professor and with David from Para, but they're both scheduled. So there's a lot of people who are going to be on this, talking about this, because we are all the ones who have been fighting for transparency so hard. So there's a lot to be learned, and I hope that you guys go watch that for sure this week. Again, Monday evening, it will premiere at some point. It depends when I get these last 2 done and get it edited. But what happened yesterday here in Colorado was the beginning of the court case. So Uber is suing the state of Colorado. One difference between this and like California, I'm going to use the California Prop 22 example because a lot of people can relate to that one. The Seattle pay up and all those people are familiar, but a lot of people remember Prop 22. And if you remember, when it went into effect was January of 2020. We were not in the pandemic yet. So we were a couple months out from even knowing about it. But they had just passed AB 5, and Uber and others, what they dubbed the Flex Association, other giant apps, got together and came up with a lot of money and said, listen, we want this to be voted on in November. We're not going to follow AB 5, which AB 5, if they would have just straight followed AB 5, it would have meant every driver needs to be an employee of the company. So they weren't going to follow that, obviously, and they demanded that it be on the ballot for November. The state tried to fight them, and they said at the 11th hour, they said, well, then at the last day of January at midnight, we will turn the servers off and we will no longer service the state of California. They waited till like 11:50 something. I mean, the state of California literally was calling their bluff and saying, you won't leave the state of California, it's too big. And they did call their bluff. And the state of California said, fine, we'll get it on the ballot. And so therefore they were allowed to operate till November when Prop 22 was put on the ballot, and it passed and won. So they got an exemption from AB 5. A little bit different here because Uber, it's not the state of Colorado saying, hey, this is a new law and you need to, there is a new law, but it's Uber saying, we're going to sue you for this. And the state of Colorado's stance is, you can sue us, you can do whatever you want, but they're kind of putting it back on their hands. They're saying, listen, if it comes down to it, though, you're more than welcome to leave the state. They're not begging for them to stay. They're saying, go ahead and leave. So Uber filed an injunction. They wanted a temporary, until the court case, the full case begins. They were in court yesterday for an injunction to see if they can keep operating without having to follow this law until they get their court case, kind of like the Prop 22 waiting for the ballot initiative. That's not going to happen. I don't know the results of what happened yesterday, but we were almost expecting it to be an answer yesterday of no, you're not going to get the injunction. I don't know how the court case will go. This was just the injunction. but everybody's pretty aware of this. The judge isn't going to like the fact that they've known this is a law for several months, and they waited until the last minute to file this, because that's an Uber game that we're all familiar with, but legal minds in this new year are not with that anymore. So what is happening here? So this whole law is not based around money. It is based around transparency. They have to show the drivers full transparency to the offers, and they have to offer a path to human review of deactivations. So there's a panel of people who, if you request it, if you're deactivated, you can get a human review of a panel. And the panel is spread up among, it has a couple drivers on it. It actually has a couple union members on it, but we won't dive into that because I'm not a big union fan. However, it helps balance the table. But you get a human review if you want it, if you think you were wrongfully deactivated. The transparency part is what they're going after and what this lawsuit is all about. So please join us this week, watch the podcast. But what you guys need to know is Uber understands that they have to show the driver the transparency. That part, there's no way to get around that. I mean, there's just no way. But what they're really, the big concern for them, so it's not, they're not claiming First Amendment is being violated on both sides. They're not saying even on the driver's side. They know they got to tell the drivers what the breakdown. Their problem is they don't want to reveal the secrets of the black box algorithm to the customers. And there's people on both sides of this, and there's a lot of takes to be had, and we'll talk about it on that podcast. But why? All the money they're spending across the country, it literally, we are at a point when there's not hidden tips anymore. There's not this, that, and the other. Just be transparent. If they were transparent, there'd be more money to spread amongst drivers. There would be profit for the shareholders. There would be, take their lawsuits and reduce them by 95% plus. Think of all that money that they just blow daily on fighting all of this, when really we're at a point now after all these years where transparency's always been needed and necessary, and they've fought it. But now everybody's onto the game, even the customers. Just be transparent. Even the customers are going to appreciate it. Just the fact that you're doing it. That's 13 minutes of gig news in just under 13 minutes. Peace, y'all.